We acknowledge the lives lost to suicide and recognise those who have survived suicide attempts and those who struggle today or in the past with thoughts of suicide, mental health issues, and crisis situations. We acknowledge all those who have felt the deep impact of suicide, including those who love, care, and support people experiencing suicidality and those experiencing the pain and bereavement through suicide. We respect collaboration with people who have a lived or living experience of suicide and mental health issues and value their contribution to the work we do.
I can safely say I'm still having the daily battles with the inner demons, but this time, 9 times out of 10, I have the upper hand now. I have better days now than I did historically.
Welcome to Holding On to Hope, a series that shares the stories of everyday Australians that have experienced moments in crisis and found a path to support. Whilst all of the stories shared offer hope and inspiration, at times you may hear something you find triggering. If you or someone you know needs crisis support, please phone Lifeline on 13 11 14, text 0477 13 11 14, or visit lifeline.org.au for Lifeline chat service, which is 24/7.
Welcome to Lifeline's podcast, Holding On to Hope. I'm your host, Ruben McKellar. Today, we're honoured to introduce Andrew, a Yamatji Man from Western Australia's Murchison, Gascoyne country. Andrew has walked a challenging path, grappling with depression and anxiety for over a decade. He vividly describes his journey as having the black dog visit him frequently, casting long shadows of despair and confusion. These dark clouds often obscured his sense of direction, leaving him unable to see a clear path forward. In today's episode, Andrew will share insights into his coping strategies, the hurdles he has overcome, and the message of hope he carries for both Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities. Join as we explore Andrew's inspiring journey of resilience and his commitment to making a positive impact on mental health awareness in Australia. Well, Andrew, thank you for joining us, and I'd like to invite you to share whatever you are comfortable in doing so about your teenage years.
I grew up in a house of domestic violence. Alcohol and drugs were abound. It was basically all I knew growing up. It seemed to happen across all of my mob. It didn't matter whether it was aunties, uncles, cousins, or otherwise. So, yeah. So, look, growing up in that sort of house type of household, knowing that drugs and alcohol were just a part of everyday life, unfortunately. I was 16 years old. I was coming to the end of year 12. I had no friends. I was socially isolated. Whatever family I had, I was arguing with. I knew that there was something wrong. I became violent, mostly at myself because I didn't want to sort of relay that violence to anyone else in my family, immediate or extended. I would literally try to beat whatever was wrong with me out of my system. When I was my mid-teens at 16, going on to 17, just shortly after finishing year 12. That sort of foundation, if I could put it that way, sort of led up into feelings of, suicide ideations. I knew that there was something wrong. I did try to go see GPs, but at that point in time, it wasn't as well known as today. There's so much more awareness around mental health, mental illness. But at the time, and I'm talking about the 1970s, I would see GPs. They would either say I'm stressed, they would say I'm tired, or they would say I'm a combination of both. Never anything to do with or any sort of link back to depression and anxiety, which is eventually what I was diagnosed with.
Can you paint a picture of what was going on in your world, or add a bit to when you first became aware of your own suicidal thoughts or feelings?
Basically, no friends, no family, no support network, no one to turn to, no one to sort of give me any sort of confidence in what I was doing or in any way, shape or form. Again, culturally, you can't speak of mental health issues, culturally speaking, in respect to my mob. And again, even if you do talk about it today, it's swept under the carpet. My parents thought it was a kind of flu virus that Andrew would get over, within a week or two. But it wasn't that. It was a battle with my inner demons. Inner demons go hand in hand with the inner critic. And the inner critic is effectively telling me I'm hopeless, I'm useless, there's no future. You might as well take yourself out of the picture completely. And you know, as a sort of phrase my father used to say, he would say being 6 foot above the ground is better than being 6 foot under. I sort of chose the latter. Wanted to just stop the noise in every way, shape, and form. That's exactly the sort of daily event that I faced. 100% of the time, it was inner demon battle daily.
Could you share how these feelings of suicidality affected your relationships, work, or other aspects of your everyday routine?
Found it difficult to hold down a job, and if and when I did have a job to go to, I would often put sort of excuses as some sort of smokescreen to try and get their attention away from what's wrong with Andrew. The feelings of suicidality didn't disperse. It didn't disappear. It was with me daily. I call it the monkey on my shoulder. It was like having a monkey on my shoulder with the sort of consistent negative static chatter. At the time, I found it extremely difficult to hold down a job. And what would make it worse is that I was trying to get along with mob, but everything that I was going through, just I distanced myself even further, even from my brothers and sisters who just had no idea what I was going through. But I withdrew further and further away, distanced myself from mob, knowing that I couldn't talk. Knowing that I couldn't talk about it, and if I did, it would just be swept under the carpet.
What were the significant impacts of dealing with suicidal thoughts on your mental and emotional well-being?
Effectively, it impacted my mental and emotional well-being savagely. I had zero self-confidence. I had zero belief in myself. I certainly believe that I was not destined to be walking the earth for too much longer at the time. There's nothing positive that I could see. And I use this analogy sometimes where, and this is probably an appropriate one, black clouds literally would descend to a point where, I couldn't see 2 feet in front, 2 feet behind or either side. And the dark clouds brought the sort of, again, a sort of more intense form of negative chatter, stronger inner demons.
At what point did you realize that you needed support for your suicidal thoughts or feelings?
Well, that's just it. I didn't seek help. And the help that I did get was, again, just suck it up, walk it off. That was the sort of response from the sort of GPs that I did manage to see under my own steam at the time. It wasn't until a good 20 years later, and this was a life-changing event. My son was born, and up until that sort of point in time, I was trying to be stoic, trying to be 10 foot tall and bulletproof, trying to be a manly man and just sort of try and work this out, work whatever was wrong with me out by myself. And again, it just made it worse. And again, coping mechanism was to take the edge off, turn to drugs, alcohol. And I'm talking about the times from 16 through to about my early 30s. I was still extremely violent, angry, and again, just all sort of directed at myself. Thankfully, no one else caught that. If we can sort of fast forward from mid-teens to early 30s, sort of turning point was when my son was born, and that's kind of when I knew that I needed to get help, and I needed support for these daily scenarios that I was going through. So I literally had a breakdown after my mental breakdown after my son was born. I honestly thought that I'd hit rock bottom, but I put my hand up at the time because I was responsible for my son. And finally found the right GP. She knew the signs and symptoms of depression and anxiety, and for the first time in the say 16, 17 odd years, I was correctly diagnosed with depression and anxiety.
We hope you're enjoying this episode. Lifeline's new support toolkit makes it easier to care for family, friends, and loved ones, and look after yourself along the way. Visit us at toolkit.lifeline.org.au. Now, back to the episode.
Reflecting back, what would you say was your biggest hurdle or challenge in taking that crucial first step towards getting help?
I was trying to be something I wasn't. The only role model I had at the time was my father, who, from the baby boomer generation did exactly the same thing. If there was something wrong with him, he would suck it up, walk it off. My father would be the stoic type of person. Not a really great role model to speak of, but I guess I was letting history repeat itself. So the biggest hurdle was getting over that sort of traditional perspective, or what's expected of a father, a brother, an uncle, a son, trying to sort of fit that sort of mold of the manly man, the man who doesn't need help, the man who sorts all this stuff out. That was, I think, the biggest hurdle for me. And on top of that, you've got to sort of remember it's, I've got cultural sort of pressures to compound that hurdle. So not only have you got the sort of mix of me trying to sort of repeat history and be like my father was, culturally, it brings shame to my family, shame to my mob. Anyone who suffered from a mental illness in my family, again, culturally, you just can't talk about it. A lot of my mob just suffered in silence, as I did.
Andrew, how did you go about finding the support you needed when dealing with suicidality, and what resources or methods were most beneficial for you?
First protocol was to find the GP, and that took multiple attempts. There was a lot of misdiagnosis. Finally found one. They diagnosed me with depression and anxiety, gave me a referral to a psychiatrist who thankfully wasn't the type of psychiatrist who just writes scripts for whatever ailment you have, whatever issue you have. Fortunate to meet a psychiatrist who had a holistic sort of perspective in regards to treating depression and anxiety. And from the GP, another referral rolled on to a psychologist as well. There were multiple hospital visits as well, stays within mental health hospitals. That was also part of my recovery phase, but so walking sort of side by side with the medical professional team, I like to call them. Yeah, so it was all trial and error to find the professionals that I needed.
Andrew, how has reconnecting with mob and country helped you on your journey?
I'm old enough to appreciate mob and country more so than I have ever in my 54 odd years. I actually go back. Because I'm living in Sydney. I'm originally from a very small country town in Western Australia, central Western Australia. I'm going back every 6 months now to reconnect to country, reconnect to mob. I did that just recently, and fortunately, the matriarch of my family, I like spruiking this because it's an amazing stat. My grandmother is 99 years old. 99 years old. I went home to country just recently, stay with my grandmother in the same house that I grew up in, and that all my mob sort of congregate around because my grandmother's the matriarch of the family. I reconnected to country by just walking on the red dirt that is outside of town, and that is my country. I can't explain it, but it's like everything came back into balance when I reconnected with country. That's just one part of the equation, but the other part of the equation is once everyone knows you're in town, once my mob know I'm in town, it's reconnecting with aunties, it's reconnecting with uncles, cousins, brothers, my brothers and my sisters. I can't stress this enough, and really it's only come to me in recent years that reconnecting to country, reconnecting to mob keeps my mental health strong. I was having a real tough time recently, late last year, and going back to country really made a difference. My mum has 11 brothers and sisters, so if you can imagine, multiply how many cousins I have, first, second, and so on. It's a big family. So, there's no such thing as a holiday going back to country. I'll say that. But at the same time, yeah, it's life changing. It's re-energizing. It's rebalancing. I like to call it recalibrating the sort of the mental strength.
In terms of behavior or mindset changes, Andrew, what specific actions did you implement or habits did you develop to cope with suicidal thoughts or emotions?
I can safely say I'm still having the daily battles with the inner demons, but this time, 9 times out of 10, I have the upper hand now. I have better days now than I did historically. I do a number of things. I'm heavily into martial arts, which and martial arts that have an internal focus. So there's a lot of mindfulness, a lot of taking the time out to not only just do the physical sort of training, but time out to do the mental training. So mental strength through a lot of mindfulness exercises. So I'm training. So I've done martial arts since I was about 15, 16. So that's kind of been this sort of common thread through my life, even to today. I have a mental health checklist. It's a combination of mindfulness, diarizing, gratefulness, literally writing down 3 things that I'm grateful for every day, and physical. I have to exercise physically daily. So I exercise. I try to watch what I eat. So diet wise, so really try to look after the physical element, but at the same time, I sort of, I don't ignore the sort of mental side of things, as in, need to keep the mental health strong just as you would physical strength. I do a lot of reading, a lot of writing. I speak to Indigenous communities about mental health. I find that therapeutic as well. Just educating mob about stuff that I couldn't talk about.
Andrew, looking back at your journey, what valuable insights or lessons have you learnt about yourself and your mental health?
A couple of valuable insights. Don't try to be 10 foot tall and bulletproof. Don't follow sort of a generation that wasn't a really great role model. 2, simply put your hand up for help. There's absolutely no shame brought to mob, or just no shame, full stop. Logically speaking, it's the bravest thing that you can do. And those are the sort of 2 sort of insights that I carry with myself and have for some time. Don't be 10 foot tall and bulletproof. It never works. Put your hand up for help immediately. No shame, be it non-Indigenous or Indigenous mob. And I'll sort of reiterate, this time it's better to be 6 foot above ground and in the picture versus 6 foot underground and not in the picture.
But Andrew, how are you doing now, and have you gained a better understanding of your triggers for suicidal thoughts?
My finger is definitely on the pulse 24/7, as in I know my triggers. And again, 9 times out of 10, I'm capturing the monkey on my shoulder, the inner critic and the inner demon spooking negative thoughts. I'm able to capture that. I'm able to use strategies, both physically and mentally. And that could be as simple as, going to the gym, doing some exercise, doing mindfulness, doing my martial art training. Look, now these days, much stronger. But again, I have my bad days as well. And no system is perfect, but I have a lot more sort of knowledge, a lot more tools at my disposal. And again, it doesn't require rocket science. Take yourself out for work, do some exercise. If I'm having a really bad day, I'm then immediately going to my GP, my psychologist or psychiatrist for help, just to get that extra support needed.
What would be your message of hope for someone listening who is currently struggling?
Don't try and walk it off. Just put your hand up for help. It's as simple as that. No shame in it. No shame in it whatsoever.
Thank you, Andrew, and appreciate everything that you've given us and being able to share your story and journey with us. And lastly, thank you so much for joining us and holding on to hope.
Thank you, Ruben. Really much appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Holding On to Hope, the podcast. Lifeline is grateful to all Holding On to Hope participants for choosing to share their personal lived experiences openly and courageously in order to offer hope and inspiration to others. Your act of kindness makes for a better world. And remember, you don't have to struggle alone. Visit toolkit.lifeline.org.au today.